Okay, so my presentation today is called No More Photoshop Mockups, Digital Style Guides for Drupal. So I'll kind of give you guys a little introduction to my background. My name's Ian Lintner. I work at Workiva in Ames, which used to be called Web Filings. Basically, it's a company that produces a very large service, software as a service for doing SEC filings for major corporations. And we also have a bunch of other services. I don't work on the actual app team. I work on the web team that maintains our websites and our intranet and other internal web applications. So I handle a lot of public website stuff. So I have a background in both development. I've done UX. I've done creative design. So I've kind of done a little bit of everything. Currently, I'm kind of mostly in the development space, but I have worked at an agency and done all that fun stuff too. So I want to talk a little bit about style guides. This title is a little tongue-in-cheek because I was just going through my windows. Yes, I have Photoshop open, and I have a mock-up from a designer, and so it's because I want to get rid of them, but you're never going to get rid of them. I mean, you can move towards using them less, and it doesn't have to be Photoshop. It could be another program. Personally, I like wireframes, like actually using something like Axure or Omnigraph or something like that, and then building up from there where you need to, and then having creative elements when you need them. But the reality is that people need to see things, and sometimes they need to see it visually. So we're still going to use Photoshop, Illustrator, and that kind of stuff to show people things, because some people just need to see the big picture. And that's kind of the way business works, and it depends on the company you work at. But we can use it less and be more efficient. And that's kind of what I want to talk about today. So I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of like an introduction to style guides and a little bit of theory and some of my own personal theory that I have behind them. And some of that comes from being a programmer, and I can kind of put a different perspective on style guides. So what is a style guide? Here's the standard, Wikipedia, blah, blah, blah. Basically it's just a set of standards for writing or design or specification, whatever it is, that just tells you how to design or write something or kind of build something to fit a set of standards. So basically all a style guide is, it just standardizes communication or standardizes what you build. We're going to focus on the communication aspect of it. Why? Because design is communication. And actually, I just saw a wonderful article that was titled "How to Explain Graphic Design to 4-year-olds, not 5-year-olds, 4-year-olds." And it basically was a graphic designer explaining what he did to a class of kindergartners. And basically, he showed them how to communicate certain things. Like he had a sentence that said, "Oh, the school is big," and he made the word big bigger in the sentence. And then he did other things like that kind of demonstrated, just simple ways and how we can use design to communicate different things and kind of do it more effectively. So in the idea that design is communication, style guides effectively create a language that we can use. And this is kind of technical, so basically style guides are a domain-specific language. All that means is that style guides take the language of design and we create a specialized language or a specialized set of words that we can use for our company or our problem that we're working within. Whatever we're trying to build, whether it be a website or documents, we create a language that we can use to communicate between marketers, designers, developers, other people within the organization who have no technical background or design background. We're just trying to create a way to communicate between everyone that we can all understand. So basically, what that means is domain-specific languages essentially are just abstractions on top of other languages. So we're just hiding some of the details of the actual design or the actual details of what we work on to kind of create an easier way to discuss things. And so abstractions just make it easier. You know, if we had to communicate, you know, everything we did in our job to someone to explain what we were doing, it would take forever, especially if they had no concept of what we were doing. So we have these abstractions to make things more efficient. So I'm going to talk a little bit about this concept of a general language versus a domain-specific language. So languages are constructed both syntax and semantics. And I'm a little bit of a linguistics nerd, and at a certain point, computer science essentially becomes linguistics. So that's kind of what I kind of dig part of it. So syntax is the words within the language. So in CSS, we have things like pound, F5, 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 I believe, which is called white smoke. Like a p tag, 1 pixel, or none. Those are just words. Style guides, we may call something a headline, a button, a page, a slider. So semantics are the rules, how we use the words, or grammar. So in CSS, this is a whole constructed series of like words or terms to create something that gives us, you know, that color, that size headline. In the style guide, we may have something called a call to action button. Maybe it has a red background, a text color white, and a font Arial. So I moved ahead a slide a little too fast. But so basically, we're just creating these abstractions from these basic units or terms that we have. And so before I get into how to construct a web style guide, I want to show a few style guides or some kind of interesting things that I've looked at. So this is incredibly detailed, and you know, for most of us, this gets a little nitpicky into some of like the web design we do, and it takes pixel perfect to a new meaning. So, but this is one of like Google's style guides, and so it shows like icons, different icons, and we notice we have labels for them. That's where I was talking about creating a language. These are the things that we put in our style guide so we can communicate what we mean when we talk about these things. And then so there was a couple things I just wanted to show that were kind of neat. And so lots of interesting things, you know, the shadows, drop shadows, you know, the normal stuff that you'd see if you've ever looked at a style guide. And then I'm looking for one very specific point. And this is what I was talking about, pixel perfect. I mean, I have never seen stuff like this in many other style guides where it gets down to that level of like pixel border nitpickiness. Personally, you know, for a large company like this or someone who has a lot of icons, that's, you know, really important. Most of us, it's a little more than probably what we would do. Okay, so, and I'm going to put a lot of these resources that I have in here up on the website. One of them that I also wanted to talk about was there is styleguides.io. This has tons and tons and tons of articles about style guides, different ways of doing, different ways to build them, to use them, technologies that you can use. So this is definitely a very good resource. So I'll get back to the slides here. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how to construct a web style guide. So we've gone over a little bit of the theory and my own kind of view on it, and I'm going to discuss the basics of constructing a web style guide. So basically, with almost any project, you're going to start with the simplest thing and build up. And so usually with style guides, and you'll see this in a number of other like tutorials on building style guides or blog posts or whatever. Basically, you want to start with the text. Most of the communication we do on websites these days is still text. We do have lots of images and things like that, but you know, most websites are all about the content. So we want to focus on the text styles. So that's the first thing that we're going to look at when we're trying to build our own style guide. And if we're using Drupal, there are quite a few text styles. And I'm going to get back to this module, and I'll talk a little bit about it later. But so there is a style guide module for Drupal. But one of the main things that you'll see in the Drupal style guide is that a lot of stuff focuses on text styles. I mean, that's going to be the majority of like kind of what makes up at least the base, the very base of the style guide. So we want to define things like, first we want to start out with your basic colors and fonts you're going to use. If you use something like style tiles, this is probably something you'd start out with, and then you work towards your style guide. Then you want to define things like headlines, body, paragraph, main content, links, bullets, other basic, CSS and HTML elements. And then from there, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to kind of build up from those text styles to create larger pieces of your styles. And if I go back here, so like an example is with this Drupal style guide module, we start to see things like status messages and forms. And so having, it's just about slowly, iteratively working up from where you start. And if you're building your style guide and you're doing it live, these elements should cascade, which is the basic concept of, kind of CSS cascading style sheets. So, once we start to build some of these very basic, small units in our style guides, we're going to start combining these elements to build bigger things. We're going to have text blocks, we're going to have main page content, we're going to have widgets, we're going to have sliders, advanced UI elements. So, this is just that it's just continuing this gradual process of building up and combining things to make bigger things. And you can really just keep taking this process up, and then so you can start building things from these elements. You can have things like a home page style, and a top level page style, and an inner page style, form user interaction pages. So you can just keep making this bigger and combining things. You don't necessarily have to go to this level. You could probably get away with, your first style guide or your first iteration in your style guide is probably at least just do these first two parts. If you do these first two parts and have a style guide for this, a web style guide, you're probably going to be 100% better than where you started. But if you can get to where you actually have some page types, this is where you can start taking Photoshop and using Photoshop less. And then, so finally, once we keep going, we can abstract this way the heck up there. We can have whole website sections in your style guide. You can have how a little microsite would be styled, or a whole general content tree, maybe products, everything like that, and you can have that all listed on your style guide. I'm just kind of giving some of the general theory here. I'm going to dig more into this as we go forward, and once we get to that point, I'm actually going to talk about a design system that actually kind of makes this a lot more logical. So now we've kind of talked about what's in a style, what's in a web style guide, how to construct it, how do we build it. We've took a look at kind of just a very basic, we've looked at a very complex one like Google's uses, and then we looked at one kind of based on Drupal. So how do we use Photoshop less? So when I talked about that, when I showed that Drupal style guide, the big thing is if you have a website, your style guide should not be a book, and it probably should not be a PDF. It should probably be on the web. It should be HTML. It should be CSS. It can be a lot more than that. But at the very base, it should be on the web, so you can change things as you're going. And that's the definition of a living style guide, is it never stops iterating. You can always change it. If you need to change your fonts, you go in. If you have to change your fonts for your website, you go in and change the fonts on your style guide. So your style guide should be, I have an extra B in there. Your style guide should live and evolve as your site evolves. So this is kind of a little bit of a silly conversation, but we've probably all been through this if we've done any design or worked with clients or stakeholders or anyone. So, usually your stakeholder, your user, your client will go, hey, I want to create a new product page on the site with a slide, with a slideshow of photos. And then the designer says, okay, I'll copy the old page and make some changes and send you over a mock-up of what it will look like. Maybe we'll discuss it with the developer once we're done. And then you send it over to the user. No, I didn't want that slideshow. I wanted the other one we used on that one page. And I mean, that's one of the problems is this language of not being specific in which one we want. Clients and stakeholders, if you let them, most of them will give you as little information as possible. That's not exactly true, but it's something that you either have to keep asking questions or you have to have some common language to discuss this stuff. So the designer would go, which page was it on? And then that's kind of where that conversation goes, is that you have to make sure you're on the same page, you're looking at the same content, that you say, okay, is this the page you were talking about? With the style guide, the new way, we can say, I want to create a new product page with a slideshow of photos. I must have copied that. Did I? Okay. I must be missing a page. Okay. So basically, the conversation goes like this. So the user would say, I want this product page, and then the designer can say, okay, let's pull up the style guide and look at it. Do you want slideshow A? Do you want slideshow B? Do you want slideshow C? Or whatever you name them, and you can actually have a language to discuss this rather than saying, oh, it was that slideshow on that page. And I think that's one of the big advantages. There are a lot more advantages to style guides, but that's just kind of one example I wanted to show. So, basically, the whole point of that conversation is, hopefully we can get to a point where instead of asking to see a mock-up, we can look at a style guide and we're all speaking the same language. So if you've gone to the level of creating some of these pages, you go, okay, I like product page style B. Let's use that, but I want to use slideshow D. And so you're now having language that you all can speak, or you can say, I want headline 3, or I want to use mouse type 2, or whatever your naming convention is. So, kind of getting back to this living style guide idea, technology. With the living style guide, we're going to have to use technology, and so I'm going to discuss some of the options we have. So. One way is, and since this is a Drupal specific presentation, I'm going to talk in Drupal. So if you were using Drupal, you could have a section of your site in the admin, or you could have a section of the site where you go in and you put in the HTML for the style. Really, Drupal, the community has taken care of this, and I showed the example of that. Okay. So, this is, I'm going to make this a little bigger. So, okay, that's a little better. So, this is the Drupal style guide module. And I kind of wanted to go through, we kind of talked about all of these concepts that we use. So basically, we have the style guide module creates a section of the website that And of course, I hid my title bar. There we go, because I wanted to actually see. So the style guide, and this is, and I'll include this link, but this is an example of the style guide module. I don't have this installed. I've installed it and used it more than once, and I really like it. It's a really quick way to get going based on your Drupal theme, because the style guide is just going to use the CSS that you have in your Drupal theme. So if you change your CSS, your style guide automatically changes. So we've taken care of the issue of the living style guide because it automatically evolves. But so this is located in the administration under admin appearances, probably where it should be, and style guide if you install this module. So if you're not the developer, you can ask your developer to install this, or if you do have that access, you can install it yourself. It's a really simple install. There's not a lot of configuration to it. And one of the neat things is if you use multiple themes with the Drupal style guide module, it allows you to switch between all your different themes that you use. So, you know, it instantly inherits all of these things. And so I just think that's pretty much awesome. So we'll talk a little bit about how the Drupal style guide is structured. So as we talked about, starting with the very basic elements, you know, text and colors, it starts out with a color palette. That's, you know, basically this is what almost every branding or style guide has in it, and, you know, it should be the first thing. And then we move up. As I was talking about building stuff up, we move up to text. And then we have all of these wonderful, you know, text styles, and you can add more styles to this. And so it's really not that, I don't have the admin open, so I can't show exactly how to do it, but as I recall, this is pretty easy to add new styles. So you can add all of the styles that you want to use in there. And then we're building up to things like forms, and then, you know, CSS elements like lists. And then we can even get into things like image style, which uses the Drupal image style. So you can see all of your different image styles, because almost every site I've worked on where you create image styles to size the different images, there's about 30 of them. Because people don't know, you know, which ones exist and which ones you want to use. So then you can kind of work and say, okay, we could use this one. I mean, there's always cases where they're not going to fit exactly, but it's a good way to show what Drupal can do with images and kind of explain some of that. I didn't see if there was a back to top button. So we even have things like the menu tree, you know, tables, and more text, and, you know, user interface. So this is one of the failings, though, with the Drupal style guide. You can add as much as you want, but it's really not as full-featured as I'd like. You can really configure it any way you want, but, you know, I consider the Drupal style guide a great start to get you going, and if you don't have a style guide, it pretty much produces one for you based off what you already have in your Drupal site. And it helps you understand where you're kind of deviating from your base styles and, you know, what those should look like. And, you know, so you can kind of go through and kind of evaluate those to you or your developer needs to update the CSS. So that is the Drupal style guide. And so level 3 in this is what I consider kind of the ultimate way to go. So we're going to talk about Pattern Lab. There was a great presentation at DrupalCon on Pattern Lab, and I know there's a few great videos, but we're going to go a little bit over Pattern Lab. And this is where I want all of my style guides to be. So one of the downfalls with Pattern Lab is that it doesn't truly integrate with Drupal like the Drupal style guidance. So, you know, that's something you're going to have to deal with, is that you're going to have to keep the two in sync. There are some ways to try to do this, but it's not there yet. Eventually, you know, someone's going to create a good way to do this. It just hasn't. There may be modules out there, and I may be wrong. It may already exist, but I don't think there's a good way to keep them in sync. But Pattern Lab uses the concept of atomic design. And atomic design is a design system. Basically, what atomic design does is it takes all of that stuff we were talking about, abstracting a design language and all of these different systems and building up. It takes care of that whole concept for you. So it's basically a design system in a box for your website and your style guide. And I can't gush enough about how much I love Pattern Lab. But so I'll dig into it a little bit. So Pattern Lab takes this concept of atomic design, which is constructed of the idea that you start out with, from the physical world, you start out with atoms, which you can combine into molecules, which you can combine into organisms, and then eventually things like templates and pages. So I'm going to pull up the demo here. So this is what a Pattern Lab style guide looks like. It is kind of a full subsite in and of itself, and that's what I was talking about. It doesn't sync with Drupal. It is its own site that you may host on its own, or in a subdirectory on Drupal or on your intranet or something like that. But really, looking at it from the start, I don't see too much different from what we were talking about with Drupal. I mean, we just have the basic concept of starting out with the smallest thing possible, atoms. So we have our color palette, we have our fonts, we have things like animations. This is something we didn't have in the Drupal style guide, so that's one of the neat things that Pattern Lab kind of has for a template. Different things like visibility, a nice way to look at your heading levels, paragraphs, block quotes, inline elements. So, I mean, it's pretty out of the box. It covers quite a few of the, you know, quite a few of like the different things that you're going to use on your website. I mean, granted, you're probably going to have to customize it and add some of your own stuff, but I think it's just kind of a really nice way to at least start out. But unlike Drupal, you're going to have to customize Pattern Lab because it's not going to match your theme out of the box. So now we've kind of looked at all of these like different little atoms. We can go up to molecules. So molecules are what we talked about, just combining these base elements all together. So now, we have things like that. Is it going? It's going. Okay. So we can have things like layouts, different text blocks, media, forms, and navigation. And so I want to show kind of the different layouts. So this is where, you know, you can talk about one up, two up, that kind of stuff. This is probably not where your users are going to spend their time, is in this stuff. There may be some things that they'll spend their time with. This is more probably for your designer, unless you want to bring up very specific examples. Where you're probably going to spend more of your time is in organisms and pages and things like that. And so once we get up to organisms, we really start to see major page elements. That's where we combine a button with a search box and then like different menu items. Or we can look like what an article body should look like. I probably should we'll do this on my computer. The network is not cooperating with me today. So this is where we start to have what like an article would look like. And I believe, oh. I don't think this is, I think you can make it responsive. I don't know if it is responsive out of the box. Okay. I believe there is a way to do that, but I'm not going to focus on that too much. But so we can start combining, you know, different types of things like your comments and like, you know, latest posts, so you can have like lists of content. I mean, so when you're starting to look at style guides, this is the nuts and bolts of what you're going to be doing in Pattern Lab as you're going to be building, you know, all of these things. And so once we get up to these templates, and that's where I was talking about the page types, is now you have kind of what a whole page should look like. Now we combine all of these different organisms, and we now start to see something that looks like our website. And, you know, blogs. And so we have pagers and all of that. So, and like a detail page. And so this is where we start to have a language where we can say, okay, go to the homepage template and let's discuss what we want the next page to be. Okay. And here's where we really start to have content, is where we start to use these templates to build pages. And that's where we can really have, this is the major goal of where I was talking about no more Photoshop mockups, is if you use Pattern Lab and you get everything set up and you start using it and use your templates, you're going to have these pages that you can build. And so this is where you can create mockups in Pattern Lab as a new page type or a new example, so you can show what the new pages are going to look like. And I think this is the real power of communicating this stuff. Is so you're creating, you know, example mockups with your, you know, lorem ipsum copy, rather than doing this all in Photoshop. And I mean, you can create these and delete them and whatever you need to do. So you can create 3 or 4 of them and then delete them and start over, you know, whatever you need to do for your new layout types that you're creating. And personally, I'm an advocate of, if you can, doing as much design in HTML and CSS and your CMS or in the style guide as you possibly can. You know, I think that even though Photoshop seems faster when you're like putting stuff together, I think once you have something like Pattern Lab built up, I think you can pretty quickly, you know, I don't know if you may eclipse your speed in Photoshop if you've been using it for the last decade, but I think it's when you have to come back and make a lot of changes, that's where the HTML makes it sometimes a little bit easier. And it gives you a more realistic expectation of how it's going to function once you actually have it out there, where, you know, it's a lot, because if you've done responsive layouts in Photoshop, you have to have quite a few different layouts. And I know there are tools from Adobe to handle responsive design, but really with the web, you know, that's really hard to do in either like what's the other application? Illustrator, the one that does like print layouts. InDesign, that's it. Thank you. And I've gotten a lot of mockups in InDesign too, and it's because what you can do with the text in InDesign you can't do with the text on the web all the time, and so there's sometimes a lost expectation if you're working in something like InDesign versus the web and using style guides. So, I mean, that's really kind of I guess there's the word paradise. That's what I'm looking for. Is what I would consider something like this. Oh, there we go. There's the responsive thing. That's pretty cool. I forgot about that, how cool that looks. So now we have a responsive menu. So you can show people different layouts of what it's going to look like on the phone. So we could say, 350 or 650. And so we can show all of these different elements. And I knew it was there, I just couldn't remember where it was. And that's, that's one of the big things that you can't necessarily do that with a Photoshop layout. So if I went and updated, said, okay, we want to see how this site's going to look like with, a Helvetica type font. So you can go change your Helvetica type font and see how that's going to change like headlines and page layout at all of these different sizes too. And I mean, I think, especially working with clients, I think just showing them that sometimes is cool enough. Just having that is kind of a wow as a selling point of a new website, saying, not only do you get your website, you get this awesome thing that resizes. Sometimes that's what it takes. But if you can also sell the value of selling a style guide with the website, that's, I think, some of the value added if you're in kind of that consulting business. So, I think that about covers atomic design. So, there were a couple more things that I wanted to talk about. So, a couple more resources. This is Smashing Magazine. Probably most designers read it all the time. There's some nice articles on here that has a lot of resources that you can links back to styleguide.io. Creating style guides, front-end style guides, style guide-driven development. This is another great article that that kind of recaps a lot of well, actually, it's not an article. It is a slide deck. So, this recaps a lot of the concepts here, but this is more of a development process rather than just a style guide. And then, so I'm going to get a little geeky here too. So, if you're using CSS and Sass, and this is more for, if you're on the CSS and Sass side of things, another cool kind of option, it's called Nile style sheets. And this works really good if you're using things like CSS and less, Sass and less, is that this is a system that allows you to build, generate style guides from CSS. So I'm looking for the example here, and I thought I bookmarked it. So I know it is. Oh, yeah, there it is. So one of the big things, and this is why I think Nile style sheets. Okay, where is the actual? I thought it was there. Let me see. I'm gonna have to look it up because I want to pull that one up too. Here we go. So I also think this is kind of a, GitHub has a pretty good thing with their icon, their mascot of Octocat. They do some fun stuff with that. But I mean, that's also part of a style guide if you're talking about a brand. Style guide is, some of the tone of what your characters are supposed to look like. But so this is kind of, a geeky style guide, but they have style guides for their CSS and JavaScript. So I don't think this is what I was. Let's see if this is. Oh. Let's see. Yep, pages. I was looking for the actual example. Demo. Is that it? No. Okay. Let's see. I am not. Okay, maybe I will not be showing this demo. Every link is not working for me, so I think I'm going to move on here. Okay, that's enough of Nile style sheets. I don't have enough of that. So another more kind of geeky engine is Source.js. And this one, I believe, is a Node.js style guide. And so we're kind of getting off the Drupal path here. And we're at 4:30, and this is kind of where I wanted to open it up. So I'm kind of, okay, here's the source style guide, since I wasn't going to show the KSS one. And this is kind of what the Source.js style guide generates, which this is nice too. I mean, this is more simple, and this would be more for like if you were running a Node.js or Bootstrap application instead of Drupal. And so same kind of concept. You know, we build stuff up and we add it. And so I wanted to leave the last 15 minutes kind of as some open time to discuss any questions, anything anyone wants to talk about. Does anyone have any questions about style guides or anything? Okay. I guess, does anyone have any okay. I kind of want to leave this open. So, how many of you have style guides? Is anyone using the web style guide yet? A little bit, a little bit. So this is kind of a new territory. Okay. So how many of you have seen style tiles? Does anyone use style tiles? Okay. So since some of these concepts, I guess, are kind of new. So style tiles, and this is kind of something that you'd use before getting to a style guide. So style tiles are, these are essentially what's called a mood board. And what a mood board is it's not a mock-up. It's just getting things kind of like where you can get the ideas for your mock-ups or your style guide. So a style tile is something that you're going to show to a client before you sit down in Photoshop, or you sit down and make your style guide, or you sit down and do your website. And this would be like when they say, okay, this would be essentially something you'd be working with when you have no brand yet, or you're doing a new sub-brand or a new type of branding. And so style tiles are just basically, you know, it's kind of emotional, it's kind of mood, you're interpreting, you know, what your clients say, and then you kind of work through them. And I'll show you exactly what these are. These are in Photoshop, so I'm actually showing something that's Photoshop related. But I think these are really valuable if you've never used them or worked through them. They're kind of a neat design tool. So basically, what style tiles are is, and this is kind of like, as I talked about, kind of a precursor to a style guide, but they're kind of a way to get an idea on a project and kind of use it as a pre-style guide. And this would be something that's really good if you're prototyping something, if you're doing rapid prototyping, or you're just trying to generate a website really quickly. It's a great way to kind of have a very basic style guide that's not really a style guide. So the idea behind a style tile is that you're going to have these basic concepts. You're going to have, you know, some headlines and a little bit of copy. And then you're going to have your palette colors that you want to use, and then you'll integrate them with there, and then patterns that you may want to use, and then just kind of some other stuff. And then we can kind of create a few different of these style tiles, and then you could show these to a client or a stakeholder and go, okay, which one of these do you like more? And because this is kind of a, since this is kind of these tiles you can make very quickly, you can create these a heck of a lot faster than building up a whole style guide or a whole mock-up. And so I was looking for the template. Oh, I was searching the wrong thing. Wrong. There we go. There's a template right here. Okay. So, even though I say I don't want Photoshop, I think that Photoshop definitely still has value. Okay. Okay. There we go. So this kind of gives you, oh, I know what's going on. It's because my screen size changed. There we go. So there we go. So where's my layers? Okay. So let's hide this. So if we zoom into this, basically the template is at its core is it's giving you kind of a concept for a logo and project name, possible colors. As you see, this is really no different than a mini style. And so I recommend these as a great way to kind of get to kick off a project that really doesn't have an existing design or an existing brand, or a rebranding project or something like that. And so I think that it's a way to show a client something really quickly. I mean, you can turn these style tiles around in a couple of, a few of them in a couple hours, no problem. These are a great way to base a project. Okay. Okay, and then I was going to show a couple more style guides if I have time then. So this is, and as we've seen, I've shown more than a few. There's quite a few style guide systems and design systems out there for CSS, SAS, and everything. This one is called the Hologram Style Guide. And this is an example of that system. So we have kind of the same idea, base CSS, buttons, button sizes, button styles, and where did my screen go? Other components, things like badges, frames, all of that. It has a lot of machine images. Yes, they need to update their stuff. And what I kind of like this one is like the Like the pattern labs, it had examples of JavaScript. I think that's something that's really important, is to have a lot of your JavaScript examples and widgets. And this one's aimed a little more at the front-end developer than at the actual end user. So, but this is kind of a very, very simple component. And and if you're going to be going out to build a style guide, I recommend looking at a ton of them. I mean, just kind of getting an idea, because I've just shown 3 or 4 style guide systems. I'd look at actually fully implemented style guides, because like anything, it's a good idea to get an idea of what's out there and kind of decide what fits your design style and what kind of work you're doing and what kind of clients you have, what kind of changes are they making, and you're going to want to cater your style guide to your audience as well. Pattern Lab is a gigantic design system. So Pattern Lab is something that you don't just go and go, oh, we're going to go implement Pattern Lab tomorrow. Now, Pattern Lab is definitely, it's going to be a large project undertaking. And, if possible, it would be great to use it on every site, but to use it to the full effect, it's pretty heavyweight. So I would say on every project, this is the area where you can start offering the cafeteria style offering to your clients too, where you can offer them the basic style guide, and you can offer them the advanced style guide on larger sites, or if you're doing a large website project that's going to be that takes you three months or something, and you're going to be maintaining for the next 5 years. Pattern Lab's probably going to be something that you're going to want to use with that. Or it's the company you work with and you're going to be there, and have to maintain the company corporate website or intranet. Yeah, Pattern Lab's probably the best fit for it. So, but if you're going with something where it's, you're working with a smaller client, maybe they own a restaurant, and you're setting up their website on Drupal, yeah, the Drupal style guide is probably going to fit the needs for that. And in some cases, I think every website should have a style guide, but in some cases, a style guide may be overkill, and just having maybe just a very basic, simple concept like the style tile may be the best option. And so, with style guides, as much as I love the atomic design system, and having all of that wonderful stuff perfectly categorized and bucketed, I would definitely say, be pragmatic about it, just like anything. The right style guide for each website, the right size style guide. So I think I'm gonna leave it here. It's 4:40. I'll give you 5 minutes back. Awesome.